You probably thought I'd be in the bathroom, didn't you? You know, my bathroom can't handle this much toxicity. So first I walked out into the woods, and I actually walked all the way out in the woods and sat down next to a tree and realized I left my phone at home. So I came back home, and I'm sitting in front of a tree in front of my home. I'd call this a shit show, but that would be unfair to shit shows. I did something I haven't done. I don't remember the last time I did this. Is I turned off the game when Heinrich Haarberg fumbled the ball. And I noticed there were a lot of people not in Memorial Stadium anymore. And before this game, I have to be honest, I think Steve Sipple wrote an article that, if we lose this game, that the progress by Matt Rhule has to be questioned. And I thought, well, I don't think that's true. We're still going to make a bowl game. This is still better than what we had under Frost. It is. It's embarrassing and it's horrible. But we're still better off now than we were 3 years ago before. 4 years ago before. Oh, my God, it's been so long. Before Matt Rhule came along. And I'm not ready to give up on Matt Rhule completely, but I understand why people would, because, my God, this was just embarrassing. And it was worse than a shit show. I think my biggest question about this game, if I had to ask one question, I'd ask John Butler, what the fuck were you thinking of having a 3-man front inside the 10-yard line against Iowa? And in this game, I think the offense wasn't horrible. Thank goddamn Johnson exists. Otherwise, we wouldn't bother having a football team. Because, you paid Dayton Key a lot of money to come to Nebraska, and what's he do? Drop fucking balls. You got to make plays if you expect to win games. And we didn't really make that many plays. Did we make any? I hate to pick on that one guy, but you're getting paid now. You get for all that money. That's what the money is for. And that's some John Hamm line from Mad Men. That now we got to pick on you personally. Well, not personally. That's an on-field performance thing. You got to make those plays if you expect to be big time. Because, T.J. Lateef threw some nice balls in the first half. In the second half, he was off quite a bit. And I got to wonder if that's because he hurt his knee and couldn't plant very well. But when you had the chance, we didn't make plays. Emmett Johnson made all the plays. He made the most of it. He made most of his opportunities and then some. Like I said, where will we be without him? Let's go back to the defense again. Why are you running a 3-man front against Iowa inside the 10-yard line? And I think that points, I really don't want to do a postseason, review of what I think needs to be changed. Well, we're going to go into it a little bit. Do I think Matt Rhule can still be a good coach? Yeah, I think he's a decent coach. He's not a great coach. He still has a lot to prove. I think the number one mistake that he's made in his 3 years in Nebraska, because you boil them down, is he's hired so many coaches that didn't have Power 4 head coaching experience or position experience before they started. And you got to look at this and go, what the fuck were you thinking? Why did you hire John Butler when he didn't have any Power 4? He had 1 year. Okay, 1 year. 1 year, God knows how many years ago. But he wasn't an experienced guy. He wasn't a guy that had been around the Big Ten and had been a defensive coordinator before. When you started, you had Ed Foley doing special teams, and that was an absolute fucking disaster, and that guy's still on the payroll. You brought in Phil Snow? Why did you bring in Phil Snow? So you pay him? Because this game was pretty much all about the defense, a non-functional defense. And I know that we do not have defensive linemen that can stand up to the type of football we're going to play. I think somebody before this game pointed out that I think Michael Severe tweeted something about the size of Indiana's defensive line. It's not about size. Not completely. If you're going to play 3-man fronts, you got to have a guy that's like 320 pounds that just clogs the middle, like a Ty Robinson. Typically another guy to go with him, maybe. You can't have guys that are going to get run over. And we don't have those guys. Again, 3-man front inside the 10-yard line tells you I think, most of what you needed to know about Nebraska's defense is well, we don't know. I don't think we know what we're really doing on defense, which shouldn't be that shocking because, again, John Butler didn't have a lot of head coaching experience in the Power Four as a defensive coordinator. Do I think he can be a good defensive coordinator? Yeah, I think someday he's probably going to be a decent one. But the problem with that is you align that, the problem with you not having a defensive coordinator that has a lot of experience at that level, with small guys on your line, with the scheme we're running, and the fact that you spent this last offseason in the portal going after defensive backs and wide receivers. You got two decent offensive linemen in Rocco, and Pritchett has turned out to be actually kind of decent, and the run blocking isn't that bad. But you spent your offseason not getting tough where you have to be tough to win in the Big Ten, and that is on the lines. And how you miss this, it really calls to question whether Matt Rhule is going to be the guy. I know there's probably a lot of you that are just like, I'm fed up with this guy. I'm not going to bother with him. And you know what? I understand that, because 7-5 last year to 7-5 this year, that's not, we didn't play the hardest schedule on the planet. That's not a lot of progress. And like I said, I'm still not done with Matt Rhule. I turned this into everything but about the game. And I really told myself before I was going to do this that I was going to talk about the game and not the offseason. Okay, back to the game. That's pretty much what I think about the game. Iowa mixed it up a lot, and they did a really good. Their Gronkowski guy, he threw the ball well when he needed to, and he had open guys to throw to. Because I don't know what we were doing on the back end of our defense. It was confusing as the front end of it. We didn't get a lot of pressure on the quarterback, and then when we did, he made some plays. Some of that you could expect. But Iowa, last year, Caleb Johnson took off on a 72-yard run and kicked our ass in one play. This year, it was just a lot of mixing up the offense. So Iowa's offense is a lot better than they used to be. Iowa's defense is not as good as they used to be, but they still played good enough defense to hold us 16 points and crush our hopes and dreams. Their Weegan dude made some plays on special teams that really, I think probably a lot of people are going to, he didn't break our back. We handled him decently. He got, one really good kick return that we added personal fouls on because we're fucking idiots. Because when you get personal foul, you don't hit a guy when he's on the ground. How hard is that? That's not tough. It's just dumb these days. It's not a sign of you're being aggressive. It's a sign of you're a freaking idiot. And their offense, like I was going to say, they didn't have Caleb Johnson. They didn't need him. They got enough runs from their running backs, and they mixed it up with having enough runs from Gronkowski. The one long run he took off when it was third down, and we could have got him off the field. I know that the backbreaker is probably for this game is, the fumble by Ja'Cory Barney. A lot of people wanted a targeting call in that play. Well, you didn't get it. You can complain about the refs all you want, but they didn't score 40 points. And the fact that is, if that's the turning point, means it's more damning than anything, because that means that Nebraska is right back to where we were, where we don't have the mental fortitude to come out of that stuff. Ja'Cory Barney is a really nice player, but he constantly wants to make the big play and not the smart play. And I think if I had to define one strategic problem with this team, is everybody's dumb. You know what I mean? Everybody, like from coach top here to coaches here to coaches here. Everybody has a certain level of dumbness about them. And what I mean by that is, I said this and got myself into trouble because I tell myself I'm going to do these in one takes and not hold back and not really cut and edit very much. I think there's just, you get into this position where you want to show progress and you want to succeed and you want to be, you want to win, and you suddenly, a lot of people point to athleticism and talent. I think you got to have everything up here. You have to have this here before any of the rest that matters. Players who don't have confidence in a game plan don't play as well. They don't show their athleticism. They don't show their speed, their tackling ability. So if you lose confidence, you're a much worse team than if you had some confidence. I think we could all agree on that. And that's what I'm talking about when it comes to dumbness. Ja'Cory Barney, great player, could be a great player, but again, he's constantly, maybe not return the ball. He started that in the second half. They start doing things as the game gets more out of control where they have to calm down and play smarter. But he constantly wants to make the big play and not the smart play. And I think that's endemic for a lot of other players. We constantly want to do something and, I'm going to make this so we can win. And then we're not doing our assignments and that's where things start falling apart. TJ Lateef looked like he got hurt. And I think that hurt the offense a lot because he couldn't take off and run. I think that TJ Lateef will be, he'll be a fine starting quarterback next year because I would expect the Dylan Raiola to leave and go shop himself and get paid mostly by somebody else. I'll get into that later. That's a whole different subject. I'm not sure what else to say about this game except that it's sad and embarrassing, and I stopped watching it before the end. So when I left, it was 40 to 16. I don't really give a shit what the final score was. Nebraska drops to 7-5. 8-4 would have sounded so much better. And I imagine that there's just going to be a shitstorm on social media and websites and things like that, and we're all going to be screaming bloody murder. I got to wonder how big the fallout from this game is going to be for Nebraska fans. There was somebody on the game thread, our live discussions that I've started calling them because that works better with SEO. They, said how long people are going to support this program. Well, I'm going to support it until I'm dead. I don't think not supporting the program, it doesn't send a message. They're not stupid at our athletic department. They know what's going on. I think stupid would it be to fire Matt Rhule right now and get into the game that's being played where the people are just pouring money into firing and hiring new coaches this year. Because I'll give you an example. I think Penn State is really going to damage themselves for years to come with whatever hire they make. Because if it's not right, and I think a lot of other ones, I know that, let's take the emotion out of it and look at Mike Norville at Florida State. Did he deserve to be fired? Probably. But they held off on it, probably because they didn't just want to pour money out the door. And I think right now, even though it requires, God help us, more patience, it's probably the right move for the long run. There's this attitude that, well, if you have to do something, you should just do it right away. I don't know about that because right now I think we're going to see the next round of coaches is going to be dumb money. It's going to be really stupid money. And like I said, I think Matt Rhule is still, I'm not sold on firing him because he's shown he can make changes. And I will do a separate video on this probably next week or so about what changes I think we need to see at Nebraska. But I don't think he's the one that we need to change. I know a lot of you are going to disagree with that, and that's fine. What was I saying about the game thread? I did say that all the way through. I completed that thought, which is quite frankly very difficult because I was exhausted by the second quarter. I wanted us to succeed so badly that it just wore me out. Stress with a brain injury wears me out much more than it ever did. That's why I do these videos to get out of my system. And I'm going to go back inside and I'm going to watch Texas and Texas A&M. And we turned off the game. We turned off the game so my son could go watch the Bears, which is fine with me. The NFL, I don't have big personal investments in, and I can just watch them. I watched the Packers win yesterday, and that was great. And I can watch the NFC North and not want to smash my TV or break things or burn down my house or walk into the woods and not come back or something. I don't know what else there is to say about this game. I guess the only thing I'd finish with is this. Our offensive line played a lot better as the season went on, but that's because they played a lot better in run blocking. They still have the same problem with pass blocking that they'd have. Iowa did not put a lot of pressure on TJ Lateef, not a huge amount. But we still have the problem up front where if somebody runs a stunt or a twist or something like that our offensive linemen's heads explode. And you can't have that. And I know I'm going to keep repeating this. That is probably the biggest coaching change I could see that we could make that would make the absolute biggest difference is to get a much better offensive line coach for next season. Because I think you can have some players, but if some people can't coach them, who the hell cares? You can have all the best players on the planet to make up for stuff. But if they're not being coached, this. I'm not saying anything that's really earth-shattering here, am I? As the Iowa fans, I guess, good job. Abuse me to death. We deserve it. Happy Thanksgiving. I had a lot of pie. I woke up this morning with a hangover. I don't drink anymore, but by God, I had one hell of a hangover from pie. And the one thing I love about Thanksgiving is, for some reason, it's the only time of the year I can have pecan pie. I need to change that about my life. I think I gobbled on long enough about this. But you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to shut this off, and I'm going to go have a great big frickin' piece of pecan pie. And then I'm going to follow it up with a great big piece of pumpkin pie. I'm going to wake up tomorrow morning with a hangover and cheer for everybody else to lose. Happy Thanksgiving. Go Big Red.